Titans.
Good afternoon, good evening, hello everybody, and welcome back. So we've got a little bit of a jam-packed schedule today. Firstly, hello to everybody. Janice and Mark have become members. Thank you. Scientology Peeling the Onion. Hello, Karen and Judge Fred. Mama Bluebird SP Go Power Thetans. Thank you for joining us. So for those of you who have been following my channel for a little while, the new Church of Scientology in Paris opened in April. Was it April? Yeah, it was April. God, it goes by so quickly. And I went over there to protest and to document and see what's going on. And I was joined by a journalist called Callum Clark, who managed to get in to the inner circle of the event with his camera and capture exactly what was going on after we were chaperoned away. And a bunch of you have been asking when you can see Callum's footage, when you're going to see the documentary. And Callum has now dropped the 7-minute documentary about the opening. So we're going to start off just by playing that documentary. We're going to watch it together now, and then we're going to speak to Callum, who is there in the wings waiting for us afterwards. So think of some questions, get them in the live chat, and we'll pull them up shortly. Please go and subscribe to Callum's channel. There's a link down below to his channel and the video that you can watch on his channel too. But this is Callum's documentary, which is much anticipated. So let's give this a watch, and I'll see you guys in a...
Opening day of Scientology's new base in Paris. The man approaching the camera is Eric Roux, president of the Union of Churches of Scientology of France.
Vous êtes une chaîne de télé ou...
No parle français.
Ah, you are from where?
Cork.
Okay. And you're like by your own or your TV channel? Or...
I'm doing this for a university assignment.
University assignment.
Yeah.
Super nice.
It's good. I'm excited. You excited?
Am I?
Excited?
Of course I am.
The Église de Scientologie at Celebrity Centre de Grand Paris. Scientology's opulent new French headquarters situated in the country's poorest suburb. Many have attempted to stop this building from opening. 30,000 Saint-Denis residents tried to stop Scientology moving in when the site was purchased for 33 million euros in 2017. Resistance has also come from Saint-Denis City Hall, with the municipality preventing Scientology from developing the site and opening it to the public. But in December 2021, the Court of Appeal in Paris stepped in, ruling in favor of the Church of Scientology and permitting them to open their new Parisian base. And so, on the 6th of April 2024, the Church of Scientology and Celebrity Centre of Greater Paris opened its doors for the first time. Despite the resistance of Saint-Denis residents, there were no Parisian protesters at the opening of the Église. The opposition was instead represented by a small group who had travelled to France for the opening. Alexander Barnes-Ross was just 14 when he joined the Church of Scientology, becoming Director of Public Book Sales for the Church of Scientology of London. Now out of the church and known as Apostate Alex, Barnes-Ross believes today's opening is superficial.
They want to give the appearance that they're expanding, that they're so popular and expanding so much they have to buy this massive new building because there's so many Scientologists. And look how many people are here today. I mean, there's Scientologists coming in their truckloads from different orgs around Europe that have come just for the day to make it look busy. It's all a facade. They're investing in this real estate, and all this property to make people believe that Scientology is growing and expanding, but it's just simply not the case.
Over the wall from the Église de Scientologie is this summer's Olympic Stadium, the Stade de France. Alex believes Scientology will attempt to recruit those who pass the site on their way to the 80,000-seater venue.
We've got the Olympics just around the corner. We want to use this as a marketing platform to promote Scientology during the Olympics. So it's hugely a strategic move for Scientology to be opening their new org here in Paris.
Alex was joined in Paris by former Scientologist Peter Griffiths. Both Alex and Pete were escorted off the street by French police, deemed to have been protesting without a permit. To find out more about the mindset Scientology can instill, I caught up with the pair after proceedings had come to a close.
If anyone gets in your way or slightly disagrees, you're like a vicious attack dog. That's what Scientology makes you become.
You think you're being more ethical, and you think you're being more just and fair, but in actuality, you're not. You're becoming like a fascist, aren't you? We were talking earlier about how a person I knew who had signed a billion-year contract was actually given weapons training, and he said to me one day that if he'd been asked to go and kill someone who was against Scientology, he would have done it without any hesitation.
Scientology was invented by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard. Out of all the 1,084 books Hubbard wrote, there was ultimately only one he would be remembered for. Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, was published in 1950, giving birth to Scientology, with the first Church of Scientology being founded in 1954. Scientology officially defines itself as being a religion that offers a precise path leading to a complete and certain understanding of one's true spiritual nature and one's relationship to self, family, groups, mankind, all life forms, the material universe, the spiritual universe, and the supreme being. But not everyone agrees. France does not consider Scientology to be a religion. Scientology was instead classified as a sect by a French parliamentary report in 1995. The Court of Appeal ruled that the attempts of Saint-Denis Council to stop Scientology moving in had been a misuse of power. So, is it right to try and ban Scientology altogether? John Sweeney first investigated Scientology in 2007, presenting the Panorama documentary Scientology and Me.
Banning something like Scientology in an open society feels wrong to me. You shouldn't do it. What you should do is the people who are critics should be able to say their mind without fear of impoverishment, without them, and so that the law needs to reflect that. And journalists should be able to attack these things, but you don't have to go into a Church of Scientology. You can walk on by.
You may not have to be interested in Scientology, but what if Scientology is interested in you?
Give me name and email address, and there will be no problem. It's me. It's just to send you this. I will not send you anything else. But it's as you want. Honestly, I don't care. It's for you. If you're interested, I don't have to.
What are you going to say?
Press release, pictures of the opening that you will not see.
A press release for today?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I would like that.
Okay.
So I don't want to, I've spoken to some people, I don't want it to be too one-sided. I kind of want the voice of the church to be heard in this,
Yeah, so that would be the opportunity, because the only statement we will do is with the press release, which would be like...
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
I can give you my Callum. Okay. How long have you been in the church?
30 years.
30 years? Good 30 years?
Wonderful 30
Wonderful
years.
30 years.
Honestly, it's...
What made you join?
When I contact you with a press release,
You'll tell me.
Next week, we can have more chat.
Okay.
Today is a bit busy.
Okay. What's your name?
Eric.
Callum.
Callum.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, joining me to discuss this very well-made documentary is Callum Clark himself. How you doing, buddy? Thank you for joining.
Doing very well. Excited to be on the channel and have this conversation. Yeah.
First things first, since the making of that documentary, has Eric Roux contacted you with a
No, he has not. He has not.
Still not.
So I also contacted Johnny Jacobson, who was out there, who's done a lot of coverage on Scientology, specifically in France, to see if he had been sent a press release, because he had a similar conversation with Eric on the day. And what transpires is that there was an internally released press release, which I think you've also you saw pretty quickly as well. So that press release was really a Scientology press release for Scientologists, and Scientology business has done some good work at finding out why they may not have wanted quite a lot of people to see that, namely down to the fact that it actually shoots them. They've shot themselves in the foot with it, because it shows really, if you look closely enough, that Miscavige wasn't there. and that they snuck him in. So they don't want any kind of, people, prying at that, perusing, asking questions about the press release. So I have not been contacted by them. And I do not expect to get a late press release now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, as you say, it was very well worded and carefully written, that press release, to make it sound like Miscavige was there. But I didn't see any evidence of being there. Obviously, for those of you watching who weren't watching the live stream when we were there, Pete and I and all of the other people that were there were actually taken away from the area for the opening event itself, because we had a protest permit and it was allowing us to be in a different area. But you, Callum, somehow managed to stay in the area and capture the opening. And there's a little story there, which we'll get into in a second. But like, you would have seen if Miscavige was there, because Miscavige normally walks out on stage in front of the building and he's the one to pull the ribbon. And you were there for the whole thing. Did you see any sign of Miscavige whatsoever? Did he pull the ribbon?
No, he did not. The ribbon, as far as I could tell, was pulled by a kind of unidentified Scientology woman. Could not see her. She did this big kind of 1, 2, 3, and then the ribbon came down, and that was it. But as you say, there would be no reason for kind of him being there, and then they're trying to disguise that. I mean, my mind goes to the opening of the Ideal Org here in London, where he was center stage, with the guiding hand of the City of London Police, but we don't need to get into that. But, that was him saying, I am here, look at me. And I could kind of start to suspect it, I have to say, when during that conversation with Eric, one thing which I didn't include was, is Miscavige going to be here? And he said, you will see, sort of thing, which is, at that point I was like, well, maybe you should just say it anyway. And I imagine that, let alone me or you, but the people who had actually come to attend or had been kind of brought in to attend it were probably very disappointed by the fact that Miscavige wasn't there. Because honestly, I think that's probably the main reason why so many people turned out. I think the most obvious thing is that he was there a week before.
I think that's my calculation, my assumption. If you look at Tom Cruise's jet, I've covered this before on my channel, but Miscavige often travels in Tom Cruise's jet, and it made a trip to Paris the week before. There are photos of Miscavige giving a speech at the auditorium at the New Org in Paris. But there are some indicators that it wasn't taken on the day of the opening. Miscavige wasn't seen at the building outside at all. He's never gone, as far as I'm aware, to an Ideal Org opening and not been the one to pull the ribbon. He's only missed a handful before. But his speech that he was giving, everyone was wearing these IES French flag pins on the day. No one in the audience during Miscavige's speech is wearing those. My assumption is that he flew in, recorded a speech to open the building that was then played on the day. So kind of he was there, but not in person. So that's the way I imagine he was, it wasn't too disappointing for everyone that visited. But how did you manage to not get escorted away from the area? Because you were very clearly you were looking after my bag. Like you were with us, clearly.
Yes.
But they let you stay.
Well, yes, the Church of Scientology cannot defeat the trusty NUJ student press card. I think so. At the start of the day, I realized that I would kind of have to play it quite cautiously to be able to kind of set up, mark my territory and stay there. So as you can see from the film, I'm mainly set up on the other side of the street, looking at the front of the building on this kind of grass lawn that was there. And that was fine and well being there, because there was all of their massive, production equipment flying over around, like cameras on booms, they're moving all around. And then there was another kind of more established tech team running some cameras just to my left, where you guys were actually directly behind. So from that moment on, I was kind of like, well, just set up set everything up, and then you'll kind of become part of the furniture. You will no longer, be sticking out so much. And that was all fine and well, but then obviously they started to get a bit irked, particularly around what you guys were doing. So obviously there was one attempt to move you on, which they were unsuccessful at. And then upon the second one, then it was obvious that they were really now, you know, kind of clamping down before things were about to happen. You know, the event was about to really kickstart. And at that point, I actually tried to move closer. I tried to move onto the pavement. So I was moving probably about 10 yards. I think you were actually still here at this point. And the guy who is recording you in the film at the start of it, he came up to me and he was like, I think it would be more simple if you stayed on the grass. I was like, well, simplicity apart, I can stand on this, you know, I can stand on this pavement. You do not own this pavement. And then he kind of went over to the police and they said, what are you doing here? And all I had to do was show the press card, and that was enough. Because there was no way that they were going to be able to move me on. And I think part of the fact that I wasn't necessarily being too provocative also helped in that. But then once I stayed on the pavement, I was aware of the fact that that was actually going to become a problem. So the guy moves away, he's annoyed, but I'm still there. I've got, you know, I'm getting some good shots, I think. And lo and behold, I'm kind of just looking down the camera. I think I'm filming the Église de Scientology, the front of it, and literally look up, and all of a sudden it's kind of like 5 of them around me, and they're going. So this lady from Venezuela, who's one of the directors, she comes up and she goes, and she kind of has that smile, which is just which is fake. It's kind of unnervingly nice, right? And she's like, I know. As a director that we all want to get the best shots and everything like that. And she's like trying to completely come on my level. Okay. And then she goes, but you're in the shot effectively. So you are going to have to move. And I was kind of like, well, I don't think I can necessarily be in the shot. I don't know why they want to be shooting it from that far removed. Obviously they want the illusion of there being lots of people, but whatever. So I was like, okay. And Eric kind of comes over as well. And at this point, I actually do think, do you know what? I'm not going to run the risk of being completely removed off the street. I will just move back and comply with them, which I don't regret, because then I was actually taken into their literal inner circle with all these kind of gold stanchion posts and red rope. I mean, the showmanship is quite remarkable. And at that point, I was actually able to talk with this lady, this Venezuelan lady who's running the camera. That was quite an interesting conversation, because that was probably the first real engagement, and kind of we didn't exchange much of a conversation, but we exchanged words, and she was obviously brainwashed. There's no real there was just in kind of asking her like why she joined the church, what was good about it. There wasn't really much of like a personal reinforcement in it. It was almost kind of drilled in. There seemed to be kind of lines that I was getting, which were quite weird. I overheard a big conversation which she and another runner, as it were just kind of trying to have small talk, and they were like, "Oh, don't you just love the trees at this time of year?" And I was like, "Who actually talked like what?" So that was very interesting. So that is how I managed to stay there. Obviously, I wasn't deemed as a protester like you and Peter, unfortunately, were, and the others that you were with. Protesting without a permit, so moved to a designated roundabout, which is quite interesting.
Which is mad, because we did have a permit, and that was the whole discussion, was that the permit was for the roundabout at the end of the road. That's where we were our designated area to protest. So they said, you're protesting without a permit. And then the guy who we were with, who applied for the permit, said, no, here is our permit. And then they were like, oh, it's not real, it's fake. And then we were like, no, it's stamped from the authorities. And the police were like, oh, okay, well, actually, it says that you have to be in this area. So we were protesting just in the wrong area, is what their excuse was.
Yeah, it was the police nationale, wasn't it? I mean, they were interesting on the day. And I think the main reason I would suspect for Miscavige not turning up is that they did fear, based on the petition that had been sent around with 30,000 Saint-Denis residents saying, we don't want you coming anywhere near Saint-Denis. and the kind of scrutiny they'd been under from the municipality itself and the mayor. Now, obviously, that mayor, I believe, and that municipality at City Hall, at the Saint-Denis City Hall, had changed hands, which is part of the reason why they were actually able to open this and force it through. But they probably did anticipate that there was potentially going to be some trouble, which is obviously why Miscavige probably stayed away. You know, he doesn't want to at this big showpiece event say, you know, here we are in Paris, and someone shouts out some, you know, some obscenity or something. But then
just like what happened in November at the IES event.
Yeah. But then at the same time, the police seemed to be, it didn't seem like they'd kind of been drilled on anything. And they did seem to just kind of be thinking on their feet. I would have probably liked to, I mean, they were obviously quite compliant with Scientology, because they were probably just thinking, look, it's in their best interest to kind of keep this calm and peaceful. And the way to do that is for this day, we'll let them do what they tell us to, almost. Yeah. Because that was the thing, right? So the first time they tried to move you on, that they just didn't really have enough on you. But I did see the second time that guy who was filming you, he then came up, he went back to them and he showed them some sort of, you know, video of something or a photo of something, and that was enough to kind of to nail you. Because
that's when they came in hard. Like, they were fairly polite to begin with. The police looked at my passport and they were like, you know, okay, fine. I said, no, I'm just recording a live stream. It's whatever. And it wasn't until after that they came up to me, and the police were suddenly like, no, you need to leave now. And they were very forceful. So whatever he showed, it must have been a video or a picture of me protesting in the UK or something. I don't know. But so two questions. Firstly, what was it like for you? Because this would have been your first Scientology experience, like coming face to face with Scientologists, going to an event. So what was that like for you? And then secondly, what brought you to be doing this? Like, what led you on to this project? Why did you end up standing there on the street with me in Paris?
Yeah, well, I can probably answer both of those questions in one story, I suppose. So I have just completed my MA in broadcast journalism at City, University of London. And we do these sort of simulated news days. And for one of the penultimate ones, someone on my team had kind of suggested they'd caught whiff of do I call it a protest or a celebration, but that there was a group who were going down to the Ideal organization in London, just below St. Paul's, and they were going to deliver a birthday cake for good old L. Ron Hubbard's birthday. So my ears pricked up at that, but the lecturers very quickly shut it down.
Did they?
Oh yeah. For fear of it was kind of, it got brought up, and then someone said, "Oh, Scientology wouldn't go near that," and then everyone was like, "Okay," you know. They just didn't want to kind of, you know, go there. They were a bit scared, a bit threatened, maybe about our own personal security. I don't know. But anyhow, I've noted that, and I was like, well, that sounds very interesting. I was just intrigued by it, because I have kind of been interested in Scientology for quite a while. And then I got there. They had two students who'd been in contact with you already, and I got in contact with one of them, then got in contact with you, and went down to that celebration, as it were. And, you know, I was very, very intrigued by what I was seeing. And then we did an interview at City, which you were interestingly followed to. But then
they were on to me. That week was particular. So in terms of following me around, like Scientology, fair game, following its critics and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot more prevalent in the US to what it is here. When I was in LA, I was followed when we went to the Gold Base and so on. In the UK, I found that it's very responsive to what I'm doing. So if I'm organizing a protest or if I'm doing some sort of in-person activism, then I have PIs following me for a week or two or a month or whatever, and then it dies off. And that particular time when I came to meet you at City, because it was all around that protest time, I was being followed, and I took some evasive maneuvers to make sure that they didn't you know, see that connection to you, and that was quite exciting. But what an introduction. Hi, I'm Alex and I'm being followed.
exactly. And then at I don't know if you mentioned it in the initial interview, or just as, I think it was just as we were packing up, And then you said, I'm actually off to Paris. Because at this stage, I was mainly looking at doing a documentary on yourself and Scientology in Britain today and all this. And then I was like, okay, what's that? And then obviously, you reveal that there's actually this huge dispute going on, which is incredibly unique and timely, given the proximity of the site to this summer's Olympic Stadium, the Stade de France, and that this was all going to go down on the 6th of April, 2024. And I thought, well, that actually sounds perfect. That sounds like something I could go down and cover and do as this documentary. So that's kind of how I stumbled into it. There was a moment in Paris where I was like, okay, I had originally actually wanted to do the project on Lord Lucan, which maybe I should have stuck to because he's on the front page of the Mail today. But that was how I got into it. But I don't think anyone really consciously finds themselves there. I think Scientology is one of these things for both people from the outside looking in and people who are actually in it themselves. You'd be better versed to talk about that, but that you just kind of stumble into it and you go down this kind of weird path, it's bizarre, but it is for all its faults, it's intriguing. It is intriguing, and it's also just kind of from like an anthropological perspective to kind of just to wrap your head around this belief and people who believe it, and to try to actually talk to some of these people and work out what's going on. And equally, obviously, the whole French angle was so interesting as of course.
Yeah. And what have you had any response? I know you said you hadn't got a press release or anything like that from them, but have you had any sort of inkling that they've tried to get in contact with you, or any strange goings on in your world since doing this?
I think I'm deemed to be too minor, not threatening enough. I think I certainly don't have the following that you do, or the desire or the productivity. I think that was actually also part of the reason why on the day a blind eye was kind of turned to me, because I remember after the conversation with Eric, when I just reinforced that this was for a university assignment, that he kind of instantly went, okay, not national press, not press, then this isn't going to come out right now, aka we don't need to worry about this, which is interesting because there was actually another crew there, but they weren't. I think they were French. They were French local, but they weren't really covering it in much, with much endeavor or scope. They didn't seem to be trying to interview anyone there or anything like that. So I think that's ultimately why I was kind of allowed on the street as the only other person filming the thing. But as far as contact goes, no. I think the main thing that I now get is if I walk past the branch at Tottenham Court Road where they, love to hand out flyers and everything, I get totally blanked. I must be the only person in London. Well, maybe you would get the same treatment, but I think that is because they do recognize me from Paris, and also from the LRH thing, and they know that I'm not really going to be interested in going into the fold. But I have to say, I actually did anticipate Eric would actually send it to me, because he did seem incredibly. He actually seemed, dare I say, quite nice, and he seemed the most kind of human out of anyone there. But and he was like, "I'll send it to you tonight. I'll send it to you tonight." But obviously, the whole thing was just a ploy to work out who I was, and if I was going to be a threat. Yeah. So, to my knowledge, I have not had any follow-up interaction. But who knows? There could be someone. Listening into this conversation other than just your viewers, but I don't know.
Oh yeah, for sure. And they definitely watch all of the content on YouTube and keep a very close eye on what's going on. I think they're running out of resource, so it is so reactionary, but also threat level determined. They assess how much of a threat you present to the church, and their response to that is in tandem. So if you are organizing a protest and you're doing the stuff that I did in November, then I had PIs and all of that. I was a big threat back then. Since then, I haven't done much. So in terms of in-person activism, so they see me as less of a threat, and they follow me in different ways. They try and hack into my website and that sort of thing, and they do that with everybody. And I'm sure they would have in the moment seen you as a threat because you were there with a camera, which is why Eric Roux, the president of the Church of Scientology in Europe, came to speak to you personally to suss out what you're doing. And then as soon as he realized that you're a university student and you're not part of the national press, moved on to other things. But I'm sure if you were to carry on down this route in terms of covering them as a story and kind of going on the Scientology beat, they would assess you as more of a threat, and you might start to see more stuff. But they are so limited in resource. It's hard. They don't have enough people or time. Well, they have enough time, but they just don't have the people they used to have to attack and fair game critics like they used to. So you can get away with a lot more now. Whereas 20 years ago, you know, we're all familiar with what happened to John Sweeney, who, by the way, I'm surprised and really glad you got in that documentary. What was it like speaking to him?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I had also tried to go for through, but that one was just out of reach. But Sweeney, no, I dropped him a message. I got in contact with him and had a response, and then things fell apart. And then I kind of just, sent a couple follow-ups, and then I just got Name the Day. So boom, there we go. And he's writing a book which is just about to come out about Alexei Navalny. So I think at the time it kind of came as some, dare I say, light relief in a way as well, because like he quite enjoys kind of recalling all the coverage that he's done and all the experiences that he's had and all the stories that he's told or he's not been able to tell. But it was very interesting. He arrived at his house. We did the interview. Then we went for dinner afterwards. And obviously now now he's becoming a politician in Sutton Coldfield. So Scientologists from Sutton Coldfield, watch out. Watch this space. I suppose Tories and Labour voters too. But he was great. He was very open. We had a long discussion, firstly, just about how he got into it, the route he went down with Scientology and me in 2007, and then the Church of Fear, and then another Panorama documentary. And it was quite interesting also to kind of give him my rundown of the weekend and to kind of see from another perspective, someone who has covered Scientology rather extensively, what he made of it all. He certainly believed that it was absolutely probable. I think he said about the Miscavige thing, he said that just makes sense. That sounds like him. That sounds like something he would do, which was very interesting. And he gave a very actually interesting point about why the French are slightly different in their attitude towards Scientology. And one thing he linked, I wasn't aware of this, but he also said in Germany, there is also quite a hesitancy towards it. And he linked the fact both of them were at one stage under Nazi rule, which I find very interesting, because he said that just makes them incredibly wary of totalitarian regimes. And Scientology, at its furthest extent, is a totalitarian regime. Obviously, that's not a comparison between Scientology and the Nazis, but you can see what he's getting at. You can see why these two countries would have that attitude, which I find to be a very interesting point. I thought that was very insightful, because I have to say, probably going into it in ignorance, I would have actually assumed the opposite. I would have assumed that maybe the French had dare I say, a laissez-faire attitude to the whole thing, but quite the contrary. And that's obviously, and that was reflected on the day, because there was not a single French person there, so no one was really interested.
Yeah, I think it's interesting looking at Germany. You know, in Germany, it's not outlawed, but if you want to be a teacher or any sort of government employee, that you have to fill out a form and declare that you are not a Scientologist. You're not able to hold a position of, civil servant or any public office whilst being a member of the Church of Scientology. It's not outlawed, but it is very controlled, and there's a close eye kept on it. And it's the same or similar in France. It is on the list of of sects or cults. It is, known to be a totalitarian extremist belief system, and the residents of Saint Denis don't want the new building that is there. And like you said, there's 30,000 residents signed a petition. Interesting point you just brought up there about the international audience that was there at the opening event. I mean, if I bring this up again, here you can see, so this lady, can you see my mouse here? This lady here on the left, and that's actually Seppi, who I know very well. She is moving people around. She's arranging the shots to make sure it all looks good. And I think she's obviously still working for Golden Era Productions, or Scientology Media Productions as it is now. And she came to London to film me and the Div6 team selling books, and directed to kind of capture all this great work and expansion that we're doing, for an event that was going to be played later. But she is from the UK. She's not based in France, and she was there in France for the Paris opening, along with a number of other staff members and former friends I had. The majority of people that were there were not French Scientologists. What was your take on that? Did that surprise you? Were you expecting more French people there?
I don't know. I mean, so far as the staff goes, I think quite quickly I did realize that this is really, the building itself is really like an Easter egg, isn't it? It's it looks really pretty on the outside, but inside it is hollow, and it is hollow of function and people. And you could kind of work that out quite quickly into the day. That so some of the people I was seeing were people who I had seen when you were delivering the birthday cake to LRH. I had a conversation behind me by these two Scientologist guys, quintessentially Scientologist, shades on, suit, and they were talking in Cockney accents. And I said, well, that's interesting enough. And then so far as the people went, I think this was also quite a showpiece just for Europe generally. So I think there was quite a broad church, dare I say, of the people there. But no, there was not. There wasn't many people. There wasn't actually many people supporting it who turned up. And the whole thing about that clip that you can see there of her literally going like, "We need people here. This is an empty space. We need that to be filled." Was interesting. But on the French thing, the whole irony is that they're all there and they're waving the tricolour, but the nation that they're in, and let alone the actual the county itself, don't want really anything to do with them at all. They would say it's probably profoundly non-French. So no, as far as that goes, lack of local and national presence.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the media, like the national media, were there. I mean, I know you saw one film crew, but I did interviews with at least 3 film crews when I was there that were wandering around further down the street doing interviews with people. And it was in pretty much every major news outlet in France, and all of it was negative. There was not a single piece of press that said how fantastic this new church is opening. Wow. It was all negative and warning people about the dangers of Scientology. But that's not the feeling that we got on the day, because it was very controlled and restricted. The people that were there were the people who were invited, and anybody else was shuffled down to the end of the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was once you moved on, there was so Johnny Jacobson was there. He's done some great work on Scientology in France. He had a really good blog, but he was kind of there just more of just like as he was interested to see what was going on. And then there was also Charlie Hebdo had a presence as well, an incognito one at that. But that was interesting, and the interaction between like the Scientologists and them was also quite interesting because, for example, so Eric kind of saw the Charlie Hebdo guy and kind of gave like a wink, wink. There you go.
They sent it to me. I've actually got the final piece that they did. There we go.
Oh that is brilliant.
Yes.
I might have to send a request. That is so good.
I'll send you. I'll photocopy it and send it to you.
That is good. I mean, the cartoons alone are brilliant, but
yeah.
But so Eric kind of noticed that guy there, and then there was almost kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod between them, and he was like, "I'm out to get you. I'm out to get you." Blah blah blah. But no, I mean, it was also hard to tell from the start who was national press, say, or operating a camera, or was it just a Scientologist? That was quite hard to work out. But quite quickly, I did ascertain that the main coverage was actually coming from the Scientologists themselves. And I'm sure there would have actually been quite a lot of people who walked past me who were incognito, like the Charlie Hebdo guy who just didn't introduce themselves. And that's where the coverage came from. Because we had seen like France 24 have done a lot on this, Euro News have done a lot on this. And you were on the radio in the morning. So, people were wise to it. And quite rightly so, because the Olympics is going to be the biggest showpiece event for Paris and France in decades. Since the last one, whenever that was. So the last thing they want is it to be spoiled by this thing which they don't even like. And it is really close. Interestingly, when I went to go and shoot the Stade de France at the end of the day, actually, this is something I forgot to mention when you said, was I followed? So I was there. I was there.
No.
I can suspect that I was. So what happened was I went, you can see it. If you take a side look from that building, which is like a hexagon, octagon, I don't know, but you can see the top of the stadium. But then you kind of have to go down this big road, and you can go up the ramp, and then there's a new sort of what looked like a swimming pool stadium that they've opened on the other side. So I'm standing and just kind of filming the Stade de France, and then all of a sudden, one of them was one of the Cockney guys that I'd overheard. But I'm kind of doing this filming, and then I've probably been there for about 10 minutes, and then just kind of out of the corner along the kind of outer runway of the Stade de France walk these two Scientologists who had no reason, there was no celebration going on there. There was no one of any interest there. So I do think they were actually kind of maybe just scoping out the scene, seeing what I was up to. If I was chatting to anyone, they didn't bother me in any way, but I think there was a bit of a, we are still keeping a little, a close eye on you, which was interesting. I didn't, I kind of, at the moment, I was like, oh, is that, have they followed me? And then on reflection, I was like, probably, because I don't see why, because those guys were at the actual opening itself for the whole day. It wasn't like they were doing shifts or they had people up there operating, because they'd been on the street about 10 minutes before, and then here they were at the Stade de France. So that was quite interesting.
And did they follow you back to your hotel or Airbnb, wherever you were staying, or?
Not to my knowledge. I probably, I shouldn't say this, but I'd probably be quite an easy guy to follow, because I'm not really, I don't know if my peripheral vision is too good, but and I probably have quite a repetitive motions, but no, not to my knowledge, no.
I think what that was interesting for me, at least, was all of the hotels and Airbnbs and like the whole area was swarmed by Scientologists for the weekend, and you could spot them a mile off. And even when we were sat down doing that interview with Pete afterwards, a couple of people that I remember from being on staff in London walked into the restaurant, and they were everywhere. And it's not a place that people normally visit. It's not a tourist destination, unless you're going to something at Stade de France. It's not, you wouldn't go to that area, right? But there were dozens, if not hundreds, of Scientologists there. I
know that is, I think that's maybe also part of the reasoning that they didn't, from what I've seen, from when they kind of do really come at, like from a fair game perspective, it's almost when they feel that they might be outnumbered, so that the content which is being produced is going to get more of a reception than the church members have, or the people that they have. Whereas this was the day where they really did have strength in numbers. Not many numbers at that. You talk about the restaurant. That was a really good indicator of how many people were there. That restaurant was not big at all. So we're talking, 200, 300 people at the most, because they were all filed off to go into this restaurant at that time. And if you walk past it, you could see that, well, that's how many people are there. I don't know how many they claimed. I think they probably claimed in the thousands.
Thousands, yeah.
With all their people being managed into aesthetically pleasing crowds, but no, that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, look, let's do a couple of questions from the live chat if you're up for it, or more comments. Lily says, just watch Callum's video, very nicely done. It is very well put together, Callum. Did you do it all yourself, or did you have other people editing it and stuff for you, or is it completely Callum made?
Well, I'll send that review and your own words there to one of my markers at City, because no, it was completely independent. That's part of the reason that we so the idea was that if you were doing it as a pair, it could be 50 minutes, but if you did it individually, they wanted you to do it as 7 for my course, 7 minutes, which I would actually dispute, because they're thinking that they don't want to kind of overwork someone doing something on a solo project, and they want to make sure that the 7 minutes are going to be good content. But I feel if why not just allow us to try and do 10, and if we don't want to, then that's fine. But either way, whatever. But no, it was completely independently put together. The editing was done kind of in the last week, and then I kind of weaved in the Sweeney interview, because I did that on the Monday and it was due in on the Friday. But I am happy with how it turned out. It was interesting because part of the thing was like, well, I knew that I wanted to do it on the opening of the church and then use that to kind of really go more into what Scientology is today, and to have some really interesting perspectives and unique ones from yourself and Peter and John. And obviously the one from, so I had a conversation with one of my supervisors, and he didn't want me to include the Eric clip. But I
was going to ask how your tutors and the people marking it perceived it, what the reaction was like. How come they didn't want to include Eric?
Well, right. I mean, if I can speak my mind, I think that some students were kind of shackled by this kind of relatively archaic marking structure, which is really thinking of kind of like a Sky News TV package, which is okay, which is fine and well, and like I understand that that's what we should be working to, but at the same time, I think there should be kind of room to move in that kind of creatively, because ultimately this is the way that most of this content is actually going to be produced. It's about engagement, and so their main problem with that was that you couldn't see him, which was one thing. They were like, did he know he was being recorded? The answer to that is certainly yes, because he looks down the camera, there's a red light on it, and he comes and has a chat with me.
And also, he's the chief spokesperson of Scientology in Europe. Like, he is one of only a handful of people who are authorized to speak on camera about Scientology from their perspective. So he absolutely knew that he was being recorded. Exactly.
And you could kind of tell that in the lines he was giving. But no, and then I was like, there's no way I'm not including it. This is one of the world's kind of most dedicated and senior and experienced Scientologists. He does not speak that often. I don't care if we're looking at. I actually think the guy smoking the cigarette makes it better. But my instinct was that people will see that, and then it obviously cuts away, but they won't be disillusioned. They'll be intrigued, so they'll kind of stick with the film from that moment, and then coming back to it, because one of the main reasons was that I just needed to show that I'd actually tried to get a perspective from the church for kind of due impartiality and things like that. And those two clips show me doing that. They show that I am saying, look, I want a voice from the church, blah blah blah, and I am, slightly passive with him. I don't really, I'm sure Sweeney would have interacted very differently with him, as you might have as well. But what I was really trying to do is say, kind of, look, I just really want a voice. I really want a voice. And then from that moment, if then we do start speaking, then I can start to open up the conversation and ask the questions that maybe he doesn't want to be asked. But at that moment, I was like, just kind of roll over and hope that you get something. But no, that was deemed slightly probably like something a bohemian sort of structure by the lecturers at City. One of them said, run it by someone else and see what they say, and I did. And the person was like, I like that. That's good. It's interesting. And I think from an audience perspective, those sorts, those bits are really the bits which I would be intrigued by the most. The bits where it's not contrived. It's not really. It's not rehearsed. Like that is a real conversation which is happening on the day, which is personal and solely unique. So that was definitely why I did it. And then another thing that City criticized me for was the lack of French people. But as I said to them, I can't invent a French person, And just kind of, pour my water bottle into the ground. Here comes this French guy. There weren't any protesters there. So that was deemed to have been, my mistake. I mean, but even in the script, I say, look, despite the resistance of Saint-Denis residents, there were no French people there. But we had representation, and then that worked because I could then use you and Peter, and then moving into Sweeney works quite nicely because we have a kind of consistent coverage.
I mean, there were a couple of French people there protesting. There were 2 people who were ex-Scientologists, and there was obviously Johnny Jacobson, who's Scottish but lives in France now. But there certainly weren't any French or many French Scientologists. The number of staff in that building will probably be the majority of people who live in France who follow Scientology, and they're not allowed to speak to you. So any French Scientologist simply would be ushered away from speaking to any sort of press. So the only person that you would have been allowed to speak to would have been Eric Roux. So I think you did a fantastic job. There just weren't many French people there. It was full of an international crowd because there aren't enough French Scientologists. They had to be brought in from around Europe.
Exactly, and the first thing is just to report what the day was and what happened, and that is true because I am doing a disservice actually to the 2 French people who were there wearing the anonymous mask, right? But then so at the start of the day before you had arrived on the scene, he was there slightly just before you, and I kind of went, "Oh, can we speak? I'd love to have a chat. Are you here because you're happy, whatever?" And he went, "No, fuck off," or whatever, because he kind of deemed that I was part of their entourage,
right?
And then obviously when you came up and we introduced ourselves, then he realized that
you're on our side,
on the good side, as it were. I think he was still quite hesitant about being recorded or being on camera. And kind of generally just wanted, he was there to, let's be real, like disrupt the process. And
which is fair enough. It's a big risk speaking out. Hesse here actually has a really good, or Hessel, sorry, has a really good point here. 30 years of suffering. This was talking about Eric Roux when he mentions that he'd been in for 30 years. Obviously, Eric is a member of the SEAL organization. Yes, he's public facing, but he is subject to the same treatment as any other SEAL member in Scientology. He is very controlled in terms of what he's allowed to do, where he can go, where he lives, his food and everything is provided for him. He'll be paid no more than $50 a week. He is the same as someone who's working at St. Hill washing the dishes or something. Every SEAL member is treated the same in terms of what they get and the control over their lives. What's your reaction to that, knowing that he's the chief spokesperson, but any minute he could be subject to harsh manual labor or punishment if he says or does the wrong thing? Because that's not how it comes across when he speaks to you, obviously.
That is interesting because obviously certainly on kind of punishment and mistreatment of active staff members in Scientology, my mind goes to the hold, right, in America, and people literally getting abused by David Miscavige. Could I suspect that he was subject to such treatment? I'd probably say no. But what do I know what happens behind closed doors? But there was obviously an air to him that he was kind of in charge, and you could tell that. But he did actually seem sincerely. He did seem quite content, but he didn't actually seem as could I say kind of like robotic or droidy as everyone else. And I don't know if that is because being in the church for so long, he has acquired the capability to seem, dare I say, normal. But
I think it's because of the role he's in, and it's the same with people in Div 6, which is what I was doing, is all the public facing roles. You are drilled and trained in what to say and how to come across so that it doesn't come across as weird or creepy, especially people in OSA, the public affairs PR spokespeople, as they want to come across as normal humans. So they will practice and rehearse that so that they don't come across as strange. And he's one of the few people that is authorized to speak on behalf of Scientology. So he will be under a very close, watchful eye of Dave Miscavige. He will get feedback on that, and if he doesn't come across in the right way or say the right thing, he will be in trouble. So there's almost a fear there of having to come across as normal and friendly and nice, because they want to combat that bad PR image that they've got.
Yeah, and my mind when you were saying that goes to Tom Cruise. I mean, I he sits on the Graham Norton show and is never asked a question about Scientology, but he sits on that sofa and he kind of comes across as the best person in the room quite a lot of the time. But then obviously the mask does slip. I mean, that in Going Clear, that interview where he is completely sort of wide-eyed and is the child of Scientology, that is really disconcerting. But Eric didn't seem to have that. But then certainly the director who I was talking to, she did seem to have a bit of that sort of lack of authenticity, which is just really bizarre to kind of interact with. Kind of just a happiness which doesn't seem genuine, and then you're kind of thinking, well, what is actually under there, and what is going on, and is this smile just being developed purely from fear, and training, as it were.
I think that's what's interesting is for you as an outsider, this is your first instance of coming across Scientologists. It's your first foray into this field. You don't have a history of being a Scientologist or being a journalist that's reported on Scientology before. So this is all your first impressions. And for you to take that away from that first encounter at a major Scientology event I think it just goes to show exactly what it's like and what, how they come across, that they don't realize that's the way it is. And it's evidence that it's not just people who are disgruntled bigots and apostates like me are just trying to make them seem worse than they are. No, you're confirming here that it does come across as fake and not genuine, and there's an undertone to their behavior.
There's just a kind of almost there seems to be like a veil between kind of reality and then everything else, and that will just be, I would imagine that a lot of that is because if you're surrounded in that culture all the time, and everyone is also scared of what they're saying, and who's listening, and if someone's going to report on you or anything like that, that you do kind of just have to have this sort of everything is fine, everything is well attitude. And I don't know how much that is that you really have to tell yourself that all the time. But I mean, that is one of the ultimate ironies of the whole thing, that here is something which is meant to allegedly make you an expert communicator, but they, most of the time they come across as not genuine, and communicate to a weirder and kind of lesser degree than everyone on the outside.
What was the communication like with you? I mean, did anyone other than Eric Roux speak to you or was willing to speak to you on camera? Did they demonstrate their complete ability to communicate with anybody on any subject?
No, in the tech fold, they in that kind of, when I was in that literal inner circle, that was when I was able to kind of have the most. And obviously, I overheard that conversation about like the leaves, the trees, the leaves at this time of year, which was just so bizarre. It was almost
so weird.
It was almost like people were. It was like, this is how we think ordinary people talk, or something like that. Rather than like, did you see the game last night or something? I find it very bizarre. And then I did obviously have a few words with the guy who was recording you in the video, who wanted to move me on, and he actually did seem. He out of everyone there, he was probably the one that I would say, if I were to be intimidated by someone, it would have been him. And he did have that air about him. If there was a good cop, bad cop situation, he was certainly the bad cop, the one who eventually got the police to move you on. He didn't crack a smile at any point. He really did actually.
Was this guy?
Yeah, this guy. So he did see me as the enemy quite quickly. I did get a smile out of him, to be fair, when I looked to my right, and he was just recording me, and I was like, and he was just like, I was like, okay, and you know, it comes with the territory, I suppose. But then he was obviously irked when I said I wasn't going to move. That actually did quite obviously perturb him, and then he was not really playing ball at all. I actually just started to think of these two really young guys who were really well put together. And they kind of walked in like kind of Hollywood actors, and they were just kind of walking around the scene. And I just remember being quite thrown by how they kind of carried themselves, because they were walking as if they, you know, literally, pardon my French, were the shit. And I was just kind of looking at them going like, oh my God, if only you could kind of see yourselves. But they had almost just had the mindset that they were superior. Everyone who wasn't wearing an IAS tricolor badge was inferior.
Yeah, and that's the belief in Scientology. You know, Scientology makes you believe that you are the only people on planet Earth that are actually doing work to improve the standard of living for everybody, and everyone else can get out of the way. It does kind of feed that ego, you know, and that's just the way Scientology views themselves. Let's do some more of these. Debbie Art, thank you for becoming a channel member. That's very kind of you. Educon saying, two Scots talking Scientology, what a time to be alive. Well, you, Callum, are a little bit more Scottish than me. My family is Scottish, but I grew up in England. But yes, indeed, wave that the blue and white flag.
Yeah, no, I did actually speak to that with Eric about that, actually. Eric Roux. I said, you know, I don't believe you have a Scientology org in Edinburgh. And he was like, no, you do. They're definitely
happy. Okay. The Hubbard Academy of Personal Independence.
Yeah. And I asked him why I should enlist, and then he just didn't. I think he missed that question.
He only wants to answer the questions that he wants to answer, and that's it. You know, even when you asked him what made you join, he didn't answer. He just glazed over it in the documentary.
Oh, another thing that one of the directors said when that lady, that was another thing that she said, which did actually stick with me. That she said, I said, so what is it all about? Why, you know, what do you get from the church? And she was like, it just makes me so happy. It makes me so happy.
It's just so great. It's yay.
But that was just all she kept saying, and there was nothing else to it. There was no sort of like, my human constitution is reaping the benefits of this. I have become, my mind is switched on. I've become more intelligent. It's just, it makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. Which was another thing which, did seem to come from a place which wasn't genuine.
Yeah, I bet. Well, Callum, look, let's start to wrap things up because I know we've been over an hour now. What can we expect from you next? I mean, you finished your course. Are you going to be continuing to report on Scientology stuff? Have you got a job? Are you looking for a job? Are you going to do more videos on YouTube? What's
hopefully a bit of everything. I mean, I am open to employment. So, anyone listening likes the likes what I made, then reach out. But I think I'm just going to stay here, particularly because of the election announcement. Going slightly off topic, I do also have an interest in politics, and I think quite a lot of people in the UK have not welcomed Mr. Sunak's announcement, but a kind of pack of young budding journalists who've just graduated definitely welcomed that. But no, I think now that I've covered it once, I will look for. I will look for stories that pop up which seem interesting, and I would be happy to go back. I mean, one thing is definitely for sure is let's just see what actually happens when the Olympics kicks off. Who knows what's going to happen, especially when we've got closing ceremonies, opening ceremonies. Are they going to be out flying? Let's see where that goes. And I suppose if we were to do a Venn diagram between Scientology and politics, it falls in the middle right now of Mr. John Sweeney at the Liberal Democrats. So I don't know, maybe I'll do some coverage of him or something.
There we go. Absolutely. And look, guys watching this, go and show Callum some love. Give him a subscribe on YouTube. There's a link down below. Callum, you should totally do some more videos, not just necessarily about Scientology stuff, but get your YouTube channel up and running, and you'll get a bit of exposure that way. And you've got your Twitter or X or whatever it's called. How do people follow you on all the socials? What's the best place?
My Twitter is actually the video has been far better received on X, which was, I don't know, maybe the CRIDE are slightly better for it. It seems to have been able to infiltrate the algorithm a bit better. But that is Callum F. Clark. If people want to give me a follow on that, that would be ideal.
There we go. Awesome. Well, Callum, thank you so much for joining me for this, and I can't wait to see what's next. Stay where you are. I'm going to play the outro video, and then I'm going to tell you something that I didn't want to bring up on the live stream about something that's coming soon that I will share with the world later. But guys, thank you so much for joining. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee with the link down below. Subscribe to Callum, give him all the SPTV love, and we'll see you on the next one.